Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode and we have our famous speakers in World Talent Economy Forums. We have Mr. James Eid from California. We have Professor Rob from California. We have Professor Adrian from Australia. We have Madam Beth Lab, as well as we have our famous scholars and Professor Viva. So we want to start this session right now. I think all of our speakers from World Talent.
He just froze on my screen.
Mine too.
So,
yes.
Oh, there you go.
Yes. We start our sessions. Today's our topic is climate change, and we will discuss about our food securities issue. So I want to start from Mr. James Eid.
All right. Thank you very much, Sharif. It's wonderful to be on your show as always. The climate change issue and the food security issues. The first thing is whether or not we're having climate change. And I often run into the idea that climate change is independent of humans. Climate change is going to occur whether humans are here or not. And I think that begs the question. The question is, do humans influence climate? And by that, I don't mean whether it's raining out right now. I mean climate. And it seems to me that obviously, since the dawn of the industrial age, humans have been influencing climate. It's by changing the content of the atmosphere, including carbon emissions and things like that. And so we've obviously had an impact on it. And during the COVID, we've seen it. We can see the Himalayas, mountains in the Himalayas that were invisible before. We can see that the ocean has changed, and we can see many other instances of how, when we reduce the carbon emissions from humans, the climate does change. The world's climate does change. So we can just put that to rest, I hope, for the rest of the show. There is climate change occurring, and how are we going to adapt to it? We have to wonder, well, what are the effects, and how can we best adapt to these effects? And one of them is through the food chain supply, because there are arid conditions where there used to be arable land that you could grow crops, and now they're not being able to grow crops there. We used to have rainforests that are being affected. These have all sorts of consequences for how do we grow food, and then how do we distribute food. And it's where do we have enough food, an oversupply of food, to get it to regions that have an undersupply of it. And this distribution problem is one that there are people that can solve those distribution problems, but nobody can do it alone. You have to do it together with people that are adept at this area, that distribution, for example, this area, growth under severe conditions. There are all those experts that are out there, and we have to put their combined talent to work to solve this enormous problem. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Rob, you are a business analyst, but we are discussing about climate change and agricultural things, especially sustainable food and securities. We are actually discussing, and what your...
Yeah. So
that was a good question. That was just kind of the just leave it wide open for me in terms of what I want to talk about. So I agree with James in terms of at least for the purposes of this session, we'll take climate change as a given. It seems pretty obvious to me anyway. So the question about whether it's caused by man or not caused by man, the fact that it's coming means we still have to prepare for it. So that I think we'd set that aside as well. The problem is with climate change, you get weather pattern change, and certain crops that worked in certain areas now no longer work in those areas, and areas that had plenty of water now don't. And that means that governments and people need to adjust for the new normal. Like, no one government can stop this thing, whether it's man-made or not. And that means that for most of us, we're going to have to deal with it. And that means we're going to have to secure our food sources, because with these changes, the places we're getting food are also going to change. You just won't be able to grow produce in areas that are arid unless you make significant changes to how those areas are watered and how they're protected. You can go to desalination to get more water into areas that are now dried out. those programs should be looking for funding before you need it, because once the farmers move and the area goes fallow, getting them to come back even with available water is going to be more difficult. So you want to avoid the downturn, not respond to the downturn after everybody's left. It's kind of like, it doesn't do you a lot of good to call the fire department if your barn's already burned down. So that you've got to get this thing at the front. The most promising technology, at least I've seen to weather this particular storm, if you would, is warehouse farming. Up to 100 times more efficient in terms of land use, much cheaper in terms of cost at scale. And the thing is now you control the environment for the crops. They've been doing a lot of interesting work in areas in the United States, for instance, that are bound, like New Jersey and New York, where bringing produce closer to the consumer makes a certain amount of sense. But the other benefits really are the fact that you can continue to do this regardless of how the weather changes, and it's relatively economical. You are containing and controlling the environment and limiting the amount of space the farmer has to cover, and you can automate much of the process so your labor costs remain low. Here in the United States, again, we have a lot of problems with using illegal aliens for harvesting because it's cheap labor, and those people get abused as a result. And I'm not sure that's particularly wise. And in emerging countries, your labor is your labor. So in the end, we do have ways to deal with it. The countries need to start pivoting to start dealing with climate change, because as a group, we're not seeming to be able to turn it around at the moment. And that's it for me. Sharif, are you still there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Madam Beth, please continue today's session. Especially, we do discuss on climate change and agriculture. You have a lot of expertise on that field. And we have our new speakers. I think he's Shailesh Rao. So thank you for joining today's sessions. So Madam Beth Love.
Thank you so much, Sharif, and thank you again for having me on the World Economy Talent Economy Forum. You're doing such awesome work. Thank you. And yeah, so I want to join in and say that, yes, climate change is real. I don't even call it climate change anymore. It's been changing for a long, long time. We're at the point of crisis and even catastrophe. We have hurricanes coming even today to threaten humanity. We had fires in my home state of California. There's flooding. It's here now. And so there's no need to question whether we have it or not. It's here now, and we are the cause. And when I think about food systems, yes, the climate crisis is exacerbating problems with food worldwide through droughts, through the ways that the temperature is changing. Here in my backyard, the deciduous types of fruits that used to bear fruit aren't doing as well anymore, and now tropical fruits are doing better. That's the kind of changes we're experiencing. In some places, the insects that pollinate the particular tree are no longer in that area because they've migrated, or the tree no longer does well in that area. So it really does have a lot of impact on food systems. But what I think is really exciting is that food also holds tremendous potential to be the solution of the climate crisis, or at least one very important solution. And I want to disagree respectfully with you, Rob. I believe the technology that has proven to be the best so far at averting climate catastrophe, complete runaway global warming, would be the Mother Nature herself, and the way that she has the potential to heal when we stop hurting her. And so a forest is a much better technology than growing food in a building. So just a respectful disagreement. But the reason that the food system has tremendous potential for averting the climate crisis is that it is such a huge driver of the situation. Often people talk about fuels and energy and fossil fuels, and particularly in our transportation. And pretty much everybody knows, most people agree that the climate crisis is real. And most people know that those things are a problem. But what most people don't necessarily know is that one of the primary causes, I don't want to say cause, because the cause is obviously greed and capitalism, the way we run our world, so that whoever makes the most money gets to keep making money regardless of the cost to the natural environment. But if in terms of the sources of emissions, the way we grow our food is a really significant source. And not only that it's a significant source in terms of the amount, but in terms of the potential for change, because the greenhouse gases associated with agriculture, in particular, how we source animal-based foods for our use, those greenhouse gases, methane, nitrous oxide, black carbon, also known as black soot, these are extremely warming compared to carbon dioxide. They warm the atmosphere much more quickly, but the good news is that they come out of the atmosphere much more quickly. So whereas when I drive my car, yes, I still have a fossil fuel car. I don't drive very much, and it has very good mileage. But when I drive my car, the carbon dioxide that comes out of it is going into the atmosphere, and a portion of it will stay for hundreds of years, even thousands of years. Some of it will still be left in 10,000 years. So to change things right now just based on fossil fuel burning is impossible. But the methane is going to be gone in 12 years. The nitrous oxide is going to be gone in a little over 100 years. And the black soot, or the black carbon, is going to be gone in days to weeks. So we can very quickly draw down a lot of heat out of the atmosphere while simultaneously freeing up tremendous land if we just shift to diets that are higher in plants, or go all the way to plant-based as a human species. We'll free up so much land that will be able to be rewilded, reforested, to be able to bring the carbon back in from the soil while simultaneously cooling quickly, because we're reducing the portion of these very, very, very potent, fast, short-lived greenhouse gases.
Thank you, ma'am. We have our famous scholar, Professor Viva. So how do you want to analyze today's topic?
Hi, yeah, thank you for allowing me to come back. We have looked at desertification as a primary backdrop to the greenhouse gas levels, and we watch those because we need to know how that interacts with hydroxyl release and the hydroxyl levels in the natural atmosphere. So I have a picture that I'm going to share with you on the projection of desertification. Can you see that?
Yeah, just
predicted drought conditions. Okay, so this comes from research that was done in 2012. And what we uncovered is we were looking at the chemistry of the hydroxyl radical, which is our natural system. It's involved in removing pretty much all of the greenhouse gases and all of the pollutants that we put up. It's an exquisite system that's been studied extensively now, and was determined in 1994, which is relatively recently, that it was common throughout the whole atmosphere, and it was Mother Nature's #1 atmospheric cleanser. So when we look at the map that I've got in front of you with the 2090 to 2099 predictions of desertification, we see it's pretty substantially, but when this is happening, the hydroxyl also disappears with those red areas. So what does that mean? Well, hydroxyl is also involved in triggering precipitation because it helps our particulate matter, which is a part of the short-lived greenhouse gases, or the warming component. It helps the particulate become soluble and miscible with water mist, and when they come together, then they form droplets. So it is known to be a trigger for precipitation. So if we have less hydroxyl, such as in the red zones like this coming in the future, that means that we're probably looking at a vicious cycle of lowered precipitation, which obviously underpins any agriculture. We want to be able to rely on our precipitation systems to feed our agricultural systems, whatever kind we have. So I just want everybody to know that hydroxyl levels drop when the humidity drops and desertification increases. So it's very important for us to get a handle on desertification and greenhouse gas levels because of this. So I will just leave it at that for now as an introductory to our technology.
Thank you, thank you, Professor Viva. So we have our new speakers. I think his name is Shailesh Rao. So if you want, you can introduce yourself with our other speakers as well as how you want to analyze today's topic.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's my pleasure to be on this forum. I'm Shailesh Rao. I'm the Executive Director of Climate Healers. By profession, I'm a systems engineer, but I've been studying the environment for the last 15 years. And I just wrote a white paper about animal agriculture and being the leading cause of climate change. So I see this as it's a fundamental issue of how humanity is managing the planet. And the food system is a driver, and it actually underpins our relationship with nature and with other animals and with other people. And if you look at how we are using the planet for our food system, 13% of the land, 12 to 13% of the land is cropland. 37% of the land is grazing land for animals. Okay. Now, half the cropland output is what we currently eat directly as plant foods. And that constitutes 85% of the food we eat in terms of dry weight. Okay, so 85% of the food we eat is coming from just 6% of the land area of the planet. Then 12% of the food that we eat is animal foods. That includes meat, dairy, eggs, all put together. And that's coming from 40% of the land area of the planet. Okay, so we are deliberately using 40% of the land area of the planet to just get 12% of our food. And the remaining 3% is seafood, and we are destroying the entire ocean to get that 3% of the food we eat. So if we just switch from 85% of the food we eat to being plant foods to 100%, and actually stop using animals for other purposes, like wearing their skin and so on, then you can literally shut down the animal agriculture industry, and that will free up 37% of the land area of the planet to become forests again, to sequester carbon, to literally reverse climate change. Okay? So this is a systems issue. And from a systems perspective, our food system is an engineering shambles. I mean, I wouldn't run a chip design project like this, but we are running the whole entire planet with such incompetence, okay, in the food system. So to me, it is not only a primary driver of climate change, it is also the primary solution to climate change. And that is being ignored right now because we are running an ecological Ponzi scheme. We are not really being serious about addressing our problems.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your nice analysis with data and information. Professor Adrian, can you hear me? Professor Adrian?
He may have stepped away.
Okay. So, Mr. Jamesid. So, yes, we like from Mr. Oh, thank you, Professor Adrian. Yes.
Yes. Hello.
I know that you have a different perception about climate change. Even Professor Rob also have different kind of perception. Maybe in the future we can arrange some debate on that particular issues, like Oxford Union debate, climate change debate. But what we are observing, climate change is real. But what your different opinions on that particular point you want to share with us?
Well, yes. I mean, it's. I think it's there definitely is climate. I mean, there definitely is climate change on our planet, and we've had it for hundreds of years, actually, thousands of years, millions of years, and so I think that the question today about the climate change related food security, I think is very interesting. Probably we can probably be interesting to think about if there, regardless of what is the reason for climate change, whether we can adapt to the to making foods with a different climate, and so I think that there is actually a lot of possibilities for adapting different foods. So, for example, some places might be warmer and can grow different kind of foods or crops. Other places might be cooler. So one thing about climate change is it's not universal distribution of the same temperature, but some places become warmer, some places become cooler actually. So I think the big question is, can we adapt to such climate change? And I think it is possible for this to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jamesit. So there are different opinion and different analysis come in terms of agriculture and climate change. So you also work with, I think, different African nations. What is the feedback? What is the real scenario in Africa? What's going on when we discuss about climate change? Is there any impact there?
I don't want to be glib about this, but getting food is a daily issue for the people that I work with, and the ability to grow crops, they are just begging for the opportunity to do the labor to grow crops to be able to eat. And there are a variety, of course, economical, political, and climate-oriented reasons for this lack of food. But you can't put enough emphasis on the fact that if you cannot eat, then there are no other things that are as important as being able to survive from one day to the next. And so, yes, a lot of my foundation's work is around that. And also, once you can eat, then you can do other things, and you have to give them a sense of power, a sense of ability to empower them to do what they can for themselves, because you must start with yourself before you can do anything else. You're of no use to anyone if you're of no use to yourself. So you start there, but if you cannot find food to eat, there's very little hope. And that's what we end up battling, is this sense of hopelessness, that we can inspire hope in them, but you must start with getting them food. There's nothing, that's like the bottom tier that you're trying to build a society. And in my universe, I'd like to think of it as a just society. But be that as it may, you're never going to get into that argument about what is a just society or not just if you cannot feed the people. So it starts with that. And I love the systems approach. We are deforesting the planet in order to grow, to create grazing grounds for animals that we probably ought not be consuming in the first place. Why don't we reforest? And then by reforestation, we would then be drawing out these carbon emissions that we're putting into the environment. So it seems to me, from a systems point of view, that the solution is very simple, but we have all of these other forces that are not in favor of that for their variety of reasons, mostly making money. And so you're up against tremendous forces that do not want to do the right thing, even though you can figure out what the right thing is to do. You're butting your head against a brick wall, so to speak. But we had this argument, I can remember in the 60s, people were pouring PCBs into the rivers, and they said it's providing jobs, and people need jobs in order to eat. But when the rivers started to catch on fire, we changed our thinking, and that's what's going on now. You can't pour industrial waste into our rivers anymore. It's against the law. So we need to be aware that, our rivers are on fire, metaphorically speaking. Our whole planet is on fire. So we must change our way of thinking, our approach. Even if you cost a few jobs here, you will make jobs there. So this is a transformation. This is not a loss. This is a gain that we're talking about.
Thank you. Professor Rob, you are technology expert. What the solution we have? What the solution we have for these things? So I think you already shared some content. We will share with our audience.
I did. It really comes down to what it is you believe you can do. I tend to agree with Jim that the issue is a lot of the money and the power is on the wrong side of the solution, and so that means you have to deal. You're probably it's going to be more likely you're going to have to deal with the effect of the change, because especially if you're a small emerging country, you won't be able to deal with the change itself. You just don't have enough power. And that was my point. And we do have technology. Beth mentioned forests. We actually have carbon scrubbers that are up to 100 times more effective than forests per square feet that we can put in as well. But then somebody has to fund that technology and put it into place. I think the reality is things are going to get a lot worse before they're going to get better, which is why my argument was we probably need to shift to mitigating technologies as opposed to fixing the underlying problem. I don't disagree that we should fix the underlying problem. I don't see governments having the will to make that happen. And the end result is the funding. The people that have the money are the ones that are doing harm. And so whether we're talking about the cattlemen's union, petrochemical companies, even the farming conglomerates are often against doing specifically what we need to do to protect the planet, which means we need to start shifting and realizing that this is going to be our future is not going to be a great one unless we shift our resources and start creating technologies to mitigate the problems. Desalinization plants to provide water. I mentioned warehouse farms to protect the food supply. Jim's absolutely right. People can't really progress if they can't eat. I remember talking to Bill Gates years ago about his trip to Africa and how he'd gone into Africa with a bunch of businessmen to figure out how to sell technology to Africans. And they came back and said, these people don't have water, medicine, or food. They're not going to be buying PCs anytime soon. You have to fix the water, food, medicine problem first. And he kind of stood alone. I mean, it was really kind of, it was obvious. He was obviously right. But it wasn't like he had a ton of backup. And so he went off, quit, took his entire foundation, and much of the work that they do is focused on providing water, food, and medicine to areas that don't have it. He's also come up with some interesting ways to deal with climate after the fact, like trying to blank the sun's heat on the planet to lower the amount of energy going into the planet. But these are all just mitigating things that are trying to address the problems we ourselves are creating. And I do agree, it would be a heck of a lot easier if we just stopped creating the problems. But I'm not seeing the will to do that. And practically speaking, and my job typically is, what do you do with your resources to have the greatest impact on the underlying problem? And this problem we're looking at is, how do you keep feeding the people if your arable land is going away? And there are ways to do that, but we have to develop them. We can't wait until this land goes away and say, okay, let's now start putting in place desalinization plants, because now folks are starving and now you can't build them. So the time to actually get your arms around this and decide on a strategy to assure the health and safety of your people is now. As I say, the technology is capable of stepping up to this, but somebody still has to fund it. Whether we're talking about turning the place around and planting forests or building indoor factory farms, we still have to fund this stuff. And the thing is though, the nice thing about the warehouse farms is they are eminently more profitable where they've been put in than traditional farms. And so you do get that monetary benefit that can help drive through the technology and make the difference. But we can't just keep screaming at climate change and wishing people will do the right thing. We now have to get to buckle down and start mitigating some of the damage before we start having food riots and before we have the next world war over resources, which would do the planet and ourselves a tremendous amount of additional harm.
Thank you, Professor Rob, for your excellent analysis. We have more questions from audience, especially Madam Beth, Professor Viba, and other speakers. Shailesh Rao, I think they can analyze and give the answer of these questions. Noor Fazrin, greetings from Malaysia. How does climate change affect food sustainability? I think they want some detailed analysis. Onika Shams, how is human health affected by climate change? Noor Fazrin, what is an adaptation to climate change and climate resilience?
You might want to
Thank
just take some of those questions and just direct them at board members.
Yes. I think yes, Madam. Yes, Beth, you can analyze on this thing. How does climate change affect food sustainability? Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. So as James pointed out, we're already right now not feeding all of the people of the world, right? It's we don't live in a just world right now. We're already not feeding all the people of the world, and our population is growing and expected to grow more. And so the climate is affecting food sustainability in some of the ways I mentioned. And as some of the ways that others have mentioned, as Viva said, we're facing more serious droughts right here in my state of California. This is the most serious drought we've had in 7 years in terms of its potential, because we had the driest winter in 7 years. And around the world, the situation is far worse. So the droughts are impacting food systems, the hurricanes, the fires, the forest fires. All of the natural systems that are collapsing around us as a result of the way we use the planet do affect food systems. But again, what I want to talk about is the solution. We're not feeding all the planet now, but it is possible to feed everybody if we shift to a primarily plant diet, the diet that is most likely what our human ancestors over millennia ate, and is also the indigenous diet of many people around the world. Very plant forward, mostly plants and very few animal products. Or if we go all the way to plant-based entirely, that would work as well. There's a great body of work that was been done, and I'll paste the link in the chat, by a commission called the Eat Lancet Commission. Excuse me a second. It was an interdisciplinary international team of 37 scientists that was brought together specifically to answer the question, is it possible to feed a planet of 10 billion people by 2050 a sustainable diet that's healthy? So in other words, can everybody on the planet eat a healthy diet in a way that also sustains our Earth systems and doesn't destroy the processes that the Earth knows how to do to keep things going, right? And to make a habitable planet for us. And again, we're not feeding the people of the world a healthy diet now. So how can we do it in 2050 with 10 billion people? And the answer they came up with was yes, we can do it. But if you look at the plate that the Eat Lancet designed, if you look at the diet that they designed, it's primarily plants. And so in many parts of the world, they're already eating this diet. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the figures that Dr. Rao talked about, where 80% of our food, or I think it's 88%, a huge percentage of our food is already the plants that we eat directly. But in high consuming countries that consume a lot of animal products, like the United States, many countries in Europe, and increasingly other countries around the world, as they copy our unhealthy, unsustainable dietary patterns, we're eating far too many animal products for the planet to sustain, and also far too much for human health. The ideal diet for human health would be an entirely plant-based diet. But even as people make changes toward that, they're going to improve their health and the health of the Earth by reducing the amount of animal products. In the Eat Lancet paper, what they came up with was that red meat could be consumed maybe 3.5 ounces a week, and people be healthy, everyone be fed, and everyone be healthy, and everyone get to keep living here on this earth. And the figures for poultry and fish were not much higher. It was 2 eggs a week, very, very small amounts of animal products. So if people listening look at what's on their plate on a daily basis, are you consuming more than your fair share of what this earth can tolerate? and what can allow for everybody to eat. And if you are, you can change. But I totally agree with Rob and others who've spoken to the fact that we can't just do it as individuals. We need leadership as well. So it's both grassroots work to spread the message that there is a solution and it involves changing our diets, and also to find those allies that are in leadership positions, whether it's in corporations or in governments, that will start shifting policies so that we can handle this thing. And what I want to put in additionally is that what's really important for people to understand, there's two things that I think it's really important for people to understand regarding the topic of the climate crisis and the climate crisis and food systems. The first is that humans only have a short time to act, potentially 7 or 8 more years before, maybe even less, before we enter a point which is called runaway global warming. And after that point, the technologies we invent won't help. You know, we have a very, very short time frame in which to act, in which to totally revolutionize how we're using this planet, how we're living on this planet, and see it more as an ally, see it more as our mother. So start to embrace it and be the stewards of this earth that we're supposed to be, instead of being the exploiters of the earth. Because if we don't, then these effects of climate change, the polar ice caps melting, the wildfires raging, the hurricanes, etc., the droughts, the feedback loops that are happening are going to be exacerbating so much that it will be outside of our control to make a difference in a very short time frame. And the other thing that I think is really essential for people to get on this issue regarding food is that for those of us who are consuming too much animal products, we must reduce or we won't make it. People talk about how we could go to 0% fossil fuels with these various technologies. It's not going to work. As I mentioned earlier, the carbon dioxide comes out of the atmosphere far too slowly for it to work. We must use quicker solutions for it to work. And there is much scientific research. I'll post some of that in the Facebook chat and the public chat as well. There is much scholarship that has come out that is demonstrated that even if we go to 0% emissions from fossil fuels, we will still hit that point of no return, that runaway global warming, unless we also simultaneously change our human diets to mostly plants and very, very few animal products.
Thank you. We have our new speaker, Professor Paul, joined today's sessions. So we are just discussing about climate change and our agricultural things. I think this is one of your favorite topic. Based on your advice and guideline, we choose this topic for today. So Professor Viva, I'm coming to you. Before that, I just want to give chance to Professor Paul. How do you want to analyze today's topic?
Okay, well, a couple of very significant papers have come out on climate change and agriculture. In fact, there was just one this week and there was one last week. So basically, they call it an econometric study was done, which showed that what they call anthropogenic climate change has reduced the gains in agricultural productivity 21% since so between 1961 and 2020, right? They looked at agricultural gains mostly from which occur mostly from agricultural research, new farming methods, new technologies. And if you take a sort of metric of being the number 100 in 1961, the agricultural productivity, it went up to about 190 in 2020. But their study shows that without climate change, it would have been 210 instead of 190. So the cut from climate change is 20 divided by the baseline of 100. So it's 21%. Now this is globally. There's a lot of distribution amongst different countries. So for example, Africa is the worst, and sub-Saharan Africa is even worse. And that number is about a 34% cut. And North America is about 12.5%. Parts of Europe are the smallest, but still about 8 or 9%. So the point is climate change is already cutting into the gains that we would have otherwise obtained in the global food supply. And they mentioned that a lot of studies on food just look at yields of cereal crops, for example, but cereal crops are only 20% of agriculture of crops on land. So this study is just on terrestrial food sources. It's on agriculture and livestock on land. It doesn't talk about, we need a similar study on the oceans. And the other important study, which is even more significant to me, it looks at the terrestrial land as a sink for carbon. And what it finds is that the most common plants are the so-called C3 plants. Okay, and that's the C3 refers to the photosynthetic pathway through which carbon is removed from the atmosphere. Grasses and grains are C4 plants. Things like, some grains, like corn, for example, are C4. But the bottom line is that as we continue to warm, photosynthesis actually is highly nonlinear with temperature, and it actually peaks. And it peaks for C3 plants at 18 degrees Celsius and for C4 plants at 26 or 28, something like that. So, but respiration of these plants, which goes on at night when there's no sunlight, there's no photosynthesis, that is always increasing with temperature. So the bottom line is that this study showed that business as usual, the terrestrial vegetation will cross over and no longer be a sink for carbon in 20 years, okay, with business as usual. So so this is highly significant. What it means is that, the yields will drop significantly on most food crop plants within the next 20 years. And of course, with global population increasing and stresses, we're hitting these brick walls for food supply. So this is very, very significant and very, very serious findings. And these papers, like I say, they both just come out in the last few weeks.
Yes, I think Mr. Shailesh Rao, you want to add some point.
Yeah, I wanted to add that, we seem to always have a discourse where we think that we are extracting too little food from the planet. But in reality, we are extracting almost 6 times as much food as we need from the planet. Okay, so we eat about 1.6 billion tons of food every year, but we are extracting 9 billion tons of food from the planet. But most of it we are feeding to our animals. So we're feeding 7.3 billion tons of food to our animals, and they only give us 0.19 billion tons of food. So there's like a 40-to-1 reduction that happens going through the animal. So this is a deliberate creation of scarcity. Okay, this is not like people don't have enough to eat. There's plenty to eat. It's just that we're deliberately creating scarcity because we have an economic system that values scarcity, that does not value abundance. So if something is abundant, there is no value to it, right? So we have a system that says, I demand scarcity, and therefore we create scarcity because that's what we are valuing. And so unless we change the system, we will never solve our problems. Okay? I mean, it's just impossible. This is like, can you get the Space Shuttle Challenger to space with the O-ring that it had on it? No, it blew up. It's the same thing here, okay? So we are facing this. It's a Galileo moment in human history. Our relationship with nature, our relationship with animals has to change. Okay? We cannot still continue to pretend to be superior to animals, superior to nature. This human supremacism is what drives this current system. And to me, human supremacism is the foundational supremacism. So when we practice human supremacism, we are watering the roots of colonialism, racism, ableism, patriarchy, all of those things. So when we practice human supremacism, we don't have to wear a pointy hat and a white robe, but we might as well, because we are doing exactly the same thing. Okay? So this is why I say that it is about going vegan. It's going all the way. It's not using animals for any purpose whatsoever. I mean, treating them as fellow residents, fellow earthlings, on this earth who have every right to live just as we do. And
Thank you.
unless we take that kind of attitudinal change, we're not going to solve our problems. I'm looking at it from a systems perspective. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Viva, there is a specific question from Ahmed. What is an adaptation to climate change and climate resilience? I think they'll love to learn more about some points. Yes. Can you unmute, please?
I'm going to inject a slightly different story that's happening around veganism and meat eating with the story of a holistic management movement that's happening by a fellow by the name of Alan Savory. And he has a website, Holistic Management, it's called, and he works on managing the complexities of land and livestock. Now, I'm not an apologist for meat eating, but this is an interesting story about how in Africa he has instituted the repeated publishing of a textbook on holistic management, which is circulated within universities for 30 years, talking about how the carbon management of a holistically managed herd of cattle, which is rotated logically through different pastures for short periods of time, can actually restore the soil's ability to absorb carbon and also add trees and forest cover that also gives the evapotranspiration backdrop to a better climate. And there are lots of examples now of how this has balanced out the climate. He has here at the bottom of his chart how many hectares of land are managed holistically under his land management paradigm, how many land managers have been trained, over 12,000, and in 47 hubs. So even the meat eating livestock management field has got some good carbon management work happening that we need to be aware of, because it's going to converge with all of our other efforts as well for mitigation. So that would be an example of mitigation that I would give. I'm not an apologist for meat eaters, but I just think it's important that, because it's such an ingrained part of our thinking, while we teach each other the meme that it's not a good idea, we also do have these other explorations happening on the planet in a very practical way. So that's what I would add there.
Yeah, I would quickly say that, you're right that people are looking at other ways to extract more from nature than we already are doing. But fundamentally, I say we are in a Galileo moment, meaning the sun does not go around the earth goes around the sun. Okay. Similarly, animals were not put here for us to exploit. We are here to serve them. So unless we take that kind of attitudinal change, we will never reach a sustainable civilization in a thriving planet. So this is why I say it is a Galileo moment. So I say there are two axiomatic flaws in Western civilization. The first axiomatic flaw is that the pursuit of happiness is best accomplished by stoking and satisfying a never-ending series of latent desires in human beings. I call this the axiom of consumerism, and it's absolutely false. And yet we have an entire system, economic system, built around this. Yeah? The second axiomatic flaw is what I call the axiom of supremacism, which is that life is a competitive game in which those who have gained an advantage can possess, enslave, and exploit animals, nature, and the disadvantaged for their pursuit of happiness. And this is also absolutely false. So there is no supremacism on this planet. If you want to be supremacist, you are going to die. That's what nature is telling us. Okay? So we have to address axiomatic flaws. Otherwise, we are going to be calculating how to get to Mars, assuming that the sun goes around the Earth. You'll never get there.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
yeah,
We have
I
our
think
new speakers. Yes.
I think
Yes.
there are
Yes,
lots of
Professor.
opportunities for people to explore different ecosystem adaptations and then come together and work out what's going to, develop and what's going to be left behind. And it's a very interesting perspective that you have there, Salish. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Viva. Professor Adrian, I know
Yes.
this is midnight for you. Yes, I
Yes.
know this is midnight for you. So you can continue or you can give your concluding remarks. No problem. It's up to you. If you want to stay with us, we are happy. No problem. But it's a midnight for you, I know. Yes. So yes, there. Yeah.
Well, you want to make some comment?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's been a very interesting discussion. Been very interesting insights from all the speakers, and well, my perspective is that my background is as a engineer, electrical engineering. I'm a So I maybe am a little bit biased from that point of view, but I think that we have managed over the last hundreds and even thousands of years to find technology to increase the productivity of food production, since it's a big topic tonight. So I am quite positive that we will continue to find solutions to increase the productivity of food production, and so whether there is climate change or not, we will find solutions to this, so I'm not sure whether there was a lot of talk about plant-based diets and etc. That may be a solution, but I do remember reading a paper where they did a very detailed analysis about insects, because there was a big trend at some time that people were saying insects are going to be the food of the future, but when they did a real analysis from a whole system perspective, about the energy that goes into growing insects and the amount of energy you get out of insects, it actually is not so attractive. So I think when you look at the different types of food, you have to look at the system perspective, which is basically what is the energy efficiency of the food, and I don't know. I don't have the solution. I don't have the detailed knowledge about all the different types of food, but I'm just saying that's from an engineering point of view, that's the way to look at what is the beneficial types of food. But yes, I do remember reading a paper where the promise of insect-based food wasn't actually wasn't actually so good in terms of efficiency, and also I think we have to think about the different very different climates. For example, people who live in the far north, countries like in far north Europe or Russia, Canada, etc. Well, they can't really eat plants, right? Because the plants won't grow on the ice. So they have to rely on animals, and I think they eat seals and other animals. So, you know, we have to consider there is very different climates in the planet. So, yeah, I think before we choose or say that different types of food are better, then we need to look at them from a, you know, energy efficiency perspective, and also, you know, what is suitable for different climates. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Professor Paul. Professor Paul.
Yes. So, you know, I think that we, you know, we often, you know, when we're talking about global food supply and stresses from climate change, we tend to focus on terrestrial-based, you know, farming, on agriculture, on livestock. You know, we very seldom talk about what's going on in the oceans. You know, we know that over 90% of the large fish in the oceans have been removed, and we also, you know, we've domesticated lots of animals, you know, on the land for, for example, you know, not just for animals that we eat, but animals that produce, you know, eggs and that perform other services. You know, but we've gone way overboard, of course. I mean, there's more chickens on the planet. If you take the sum total of all the bird species in the wild on the planet, they're completely outnumbered by chickens that we raise. So, you know, we've just gone way far overboard. I mean, there are, you know, sometimes, you know, it's sort of having animals on agricultural land. They often help, you know, there's a synergy between the two in increasing crop yields, right? Because the animals will graze and they'll leave fertilizer. They'll leave their droppings, which fertilizes. So, you know, when you have, but you know, of course, we go to extremes. I mean, we have these huge enclosures that are just filled with animals being bred for food. So, you know, we've just gone way overboard on all of these things. And you know, I guess my concern is that, you know, my concern has always been that governments and policymakers, they think they don't understand truly the dire straits that we're in, or at least they haven't up to now, because the anecdotally, in the last few days, the CO2 measurement at Mauna Loa in Hawaii was 422 parts per million. And, you know, this was a one-day number. When the averages come out, my concern is that the rise in CO2 that occurs each year is going to hugely increase. I was talking about the loss of the terrestrial biosphere as a sink for carbon, and you know, we have this huge, you know, we may have this huge rise. 422, if that's what the average number is, that'll be a rise of about 6 parts per million, which will be about double any previous rise that we've ever experienced in a single year. So we don't have, you know, we have a grave emergency here. You know, not just for food supply, but for everything else, you know, to do with the abrupt climate change.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Alex.
Yes, hello everyone. Good morning. 7 a.m. here in Santa Cruz. So I have bad internet at home, so I drive into town. Right now I am downtown Santa Cruz, California, in the Bay Area of basically Central California. So I was on my way down here earlier, and there was a big trailer fire, like an 18-wheeler caught fire. I actually do a lot of journalism and work for the news media, so I put on my, you know, vest, and actually had a fire extinguisher. I got out and helped before the fire crews. So that was interesting. There was 3 explosions, and luckily I didn't get hurt. I had my full breathing apparatus and all my gear and stuff. So again, I just I want the viewers to know how important these conversations are, and I want all the people on this panel to Yeah, thank you for being a part of these conversations. These are the kind of conversations we need to be having around the world. We're in such an emergency right now. This climate emergency or apocalypse, sixth mass extinction, whatever you want to call it, it's happening. We have ecosystems collapsing around the world. We have, increase in human population and decrease in insects, and it's just horrible. We're at a horrible point in human history where we're going to choose the direction that we go. Are we going to collectively work together and fix this, or are we going to continue with the path? Thankfully, there are a lot of people around the world helping with our global transition towards sustainability, but it's not enough. We need everyone to do everything they can to lower their carbon footprint and become more ecological, because we have a lot of work to do in a short amount of time. So there's a lot of the way that I try to explain this, we do these discussions and there's just so many subjects, and the more you learn about the problems, the more you realize there's a lot of main subjects. And we've now just covered a couple subjects. We were just talking about food. There's so many subjects and categories, and then subcategories when it comes to environmental science and the solutions that we have to implement. So what we basically have to do is all become more educated, all become more knowledgeable, all learn what we can do, how to lower our carbon footprint, how to waste less food, waste less resources, because it's just so important. So I have taken some college courses in food production, edible landscape and gardening, hydroponics and aquaponics, and it's just so awesome that we can grow food hydroponically. My teacher, after I asked him, can you grow hydroponic food organically? And he said, no, it's not possible. I went to the hydroponic store. They're like, no, we don't have anything. So I ended up using this like liquid organic fertilizer. I did different ratios, and I actually grew tomatoes for like 4 or 5 months. Hydroponically and organically. Is really cool in my system. They were about 9 feet long. I had 8 of them in hydrocomb rocks, and they were spiraling around in my greenhouse outdoors. So there's just so much information, so much knowledge. Aquaponics, I actually wanted to learn how to be sustainable. So I had 4 rabbits at one time, 1 male and 3 females, and I was breeding them. I was using the rabbit droppings for the aquaponic system, just like they do in China. It was basically a closed system. I was growing plants. Really cool system. So I learned how to grow my own food. At the same time, I learned the importance of not wasting food. Like over the last 5 years, 10 years, like I hardly never waste food. If I do, I feed it to my chickens or I compost it. So we just need more people being cautious. So I just want to say a few more things. Just thank you for the viewers for watching these shows. There's a lot of information. We all just have to continue to learn from each other. These are the conversations that we have to have. We have a lot of the solutions. We just need more people to take the individual initiative to have conversations like this, watch videos like this, share this, take the time to watch the YouTube videos, go to the library, read the books, and do everything that we can. And I guess the last thing is there's a huge locust problem, spreading around the northern portion of Africa and throughout the Middle East. Feel free to Google search this locust problem if you haven't heard of it. We were just talking about eating insects. There are so many locusts right now. If we could find ways to capture those locusts and eat them for human consumption or feed them as animal livestock feed or something, there's a huge crisis right now with that. And that's what I'd like to add to this conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Alex, for joining today's sessions. I want to give special thanks to all of our speakers for joining today's sessions. I'm sure many university, school, college, government, policymakers, corporations from developing nations, they are observing today's shows. And we are also introducing different kind of training, development, and research related things with the developing nations. So we are open for collaborations. The speakers space and with their organization, we those who want to work with World Talent Economy Forum, we have our academy, Al Noor Academy. We provide training to government officials as well as corporations and university students. So we are open for that. Beside that, we are working on different kind of research and consulting issues. So those who are really want to join with World Talent Economy Forum ecosystem, we are open for that. And every day we are working and with the different organizations, and we are trying to reach with this climate change issue. Actually, climate change is real. We already offering different kind of trainings and other things, and especially the audience, those who observing today's show, share as much as possible. Share in your classroom, share with your government, share with your corporations, share with all of your local ecosystem. You can learn a lot, because these are the people, they are the experts from around the world. Like you cannot reach this kind of people like but with this World Talent Economy Forum content, you can learn a lot. Even example, today I get too much of call from Nepal. Nepal has many impact on climate change. We are working with some corporation as well as governments. So this kind of countries need support from developed nation, support from this kind of expert, and they can solve, I think, different developing nations ecosystem problem. So this is our objective. We want to work together. We want to create a meaningful solution for the peoples. Even still trust me, climate change is a very important thing, and people need more awareness. Let's say I discuss with 10 different corporations, only 1 to 2 corporations from developing nations, they are responding, they know about climate change, or they're taking initiative about climate change. Only the top level, let's prime minister of example Bangladesh, and Americans presidential activities, they have some collaboration and discussion, but Biden administration. But fact is that the root level, the grassroots level has major problem. Still there is a millions people, they do not know what will happen through this climate change issues, and there is a big debate. But our job is that unveil the real truth. We want to find out the real scientific truth. So we have all of the great experts like Professor Paul, Madam Love, Professor Viva, James Eid, and we have our great activist Alex, and all of the great people working together. So I think we need to do work more, because how we are getting feedback from grassroots level, especially developing nations scenario. I'm very honest with you, I'm frustrated what's going on. Actually, we need to create more awareness, especially we need to educate people. We not only educate people, policymakers, think tank, like academia, everywhere we have to educate. So like I'm alone, I cannot, I need more of your support, because how we respond, we need a team. As a team, we have to move forward. So I request, please join in our movement, join in our activities,
and comments, ask questions right here.
Yes, exactly. You can ask questions, and right the way they can give answers. Yes, and I'm sure like this is very effective solutions. They are the best scientists. They are the best solution providers. So this is very good opportunity. I'm sure this is very good opportunity. So thank you for joining today's sessions. And I directly want to go for the concluding remarks for today. But before that, I request everyone share as much as possible in your classroom, in your policy dialogues, with your parliament, everywhere. Thank you. Mr. James Eid, what are the concluding remarks for today?
Thank you, Sharif. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for doing what you do. It's a wonderful service that you're providing, and I'm always amazed that every time I come on your show, I learn something. So my concluding remarks are a couple of things that I want to say, because I do believe that we do need an axiomatic change. I'm a systems guy as well, and I completely agree, but I'm somewhat skeptical that we will be able to do that in time. So, but you know, in the 60s, we poured industrial waste into our rivers, and until they caught fire, no one paid attention. What are we going to do now? Wait until the oceans catch fire? You know, I think we can learn from the past and react more quickly to what is a global problem. So it doesn't matter what country you're from. It doesn't matter what language you speak. This is affecting us all. We're all in this together, and the way out is together. It's not being alone. If you say America first, you're saying America alone. So do not be alone in this. And when we have walls between us, we have problems. And if on the other side of the wall are iPhones and Air Jordan sneakers or something like that, people will find a way over, under, or around the walls. But when you're talking about having water and you're having food over the walls, people will tear them down. So let's tear them down for them before they come and get them. So it's one of those things. We will face wars. We will face catastrophic climate change and catastrophic human change as a result, unless we start to share with one another. And we do that by not building walls, but by tearing them down. Because we're all in this together, and the only solution is one that we do together. So if only one country does this, it won't help. We have to all do it together. And there are multiple solutions in incremental forms. You know, I have milk in my refrigerator made from peas. It's a small thing, but if everybody makes a small adjustment, it will add up. You know, so these things, but they're also food deserts, even in our urban societies. They can't afford to eat a plant-based diet. They are fed with fast foods, which are made from animals. And this is just what they can afford. It's the only thing available to them. And this is in a developed country in urban centers. These people don't have choice. And they are consuming massive quantity of calories that are not healthy calories. So this is another systemic problem that we have. We must get good food to people wherever they are, whatever country that they live in, whatever language they speak. Good food, nutritious food, and one that's sustainable and healthy for the planet as well. Thank you, Sharif, again.
Thank you. Madam Betlaf.
Thank you so much, Sharif. And what I want to really give you appreciations for today, Sharif, is I really appreciate having your voice so fully in the room today when you just said what you had to say. Because usually you take the moderator role and you don't say much. And I just really want to appreciate your passion and how much you're doing to get this message out in the world, especially in the developing world. And so I just want to appreciate you speaking up and talking about the importance of us doing this together and talking to our elected officials and really making the changes that we need to do. So thank you very much. Yeah, I want to, you're welcome. I want to also echo, you know, what Paul said, that this is a grave emergency. And it's also a great possibility, a great opportunity, as was also said earlier, that we can focus on the challenge or we can focus on the possibility. We need that as humans. What I've noticed in my work as a minister, that we often need pain to push before we can be pulled by a vision. We need things to get really bad to take action, especially when we have created some kind of situation in which we're comfortable with something that isn't healthy. You know, we have these incredible capacities for justifying whatever it is that we're doing. It's called cognitive dissonance. If what I'm doing is out of alignment with what I know to be good for me and for others, I'm going to figure out a way to just split off from that knowing. I'm going to figure out a way to justify what it is that I'm doing. Well, this is our moment of pain. Like, this is our moment when we need to recognize that, yes, the planet is on fire, that, yes, there are hurricanes that are coming. There are locusts. I wouldn't think of eating the locusts myself, because I think that, as Dr. Rao said, the root of the problem is human supremacism. But there are locusts going all over the planet. There are wildfires. You know, this is our moment of truth. Do we need any more pain to make it obvious that this is the issue of our lifetime? This is the challenge of our lifetime and the opportunity of our lifetime, and not only our lifetime, but probably most likely all of human lifetime, all of human existence. It's time for us to understand that our role is not as the dominator species. Our role is as the, as Dr. Rao says, the thermostat species. We are the ones that turned up the thermostat, and it is our role to turn it down. It is our time to make the changes that are needed so that we can keep living here. This is the way we can do what all spiritual traditions tell us to do, which is stewards of this beautiful earth that we have been given. It's our role to be stewards, not exploiters. And so I believe that it is the grassroots, and several people here have spoken to, Alex and several others spoke to, we need to make these changes on the individual grassroots level. We need to reach out, we need to get more people.
Come on, Beth, you got this.
Yeah, she's on a roll.
Oh,
Yes.
I'm
Oh,
sorry,
sorry
Beth,
about
if you
that.
could hear us.
Sorry about
Your computer froze.
Yes. Yes. Professor
Let's
Viva,
come back to her.
what are the concluding remarks? Yes.
Yes. Speaking of pestilence, there's also a rat overpopulation problem happening in Australia. So, it's like we literally are in the middle of Revelation. Would you like me to stop and let Beth finish, or Beth, are you finished?
I continued to talk because I wasn't sure what happened. I would love to finish. I'm not
Okay.
sure where I got dropped off, but thank you so much. So I'm not sure where I stopped. What I was saying is I do agree that with James that we need axiomatic change, and we need to do it together. And I want to expand our vision of together, because I really want to address this human supremacism part. We have tremendous potential in the natural world, which can be our partner instead of the object of our exploitation. And I too am skeptical. Sometimes I feel very fearful that we won't do it in time. And I noticed that in response to a big enough crisis, the pandemic, we did change quickly. We did change radically quickly, both at the governmental level, where governments started imposing restrictions around the world, and where people started staying home to protect their communities, wearing masks, social distancing. The vast majority of people and governments responded responsibly because the crisis was really clear. And so let's make sure this moment of pain that we are suffering right now, where around the world our Earth systems are breaking down. We've already crossed out of the safe zone on 5 of our 9 planetary boundaries, already crossed out of the safe zone on 5. 4 of them, the primary driver is animal agriculture. So systems are breaking down around us. Let this be a big enough moment of pain that we start reaching for a vision, and that together we create, that we don't even need to create the solutions, but together we act on the solutions that are already here. And I want to just invite people to, in addition to making the changes in your own life, write a letter to the editor, write a letter to your elected official, take some little action as your part of both the grassroots action that needs to happen, the education that needs to happen, and also the change at the levels of leadership. So thank you very much again for having me here, Sharif. I'm just very inspired by the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Viva, sorry, what are the concluding remarks for today?
Thank you. The advocacy work that we have had to do as a technology proponent with our hydroxyl dispersal opportunity has led us to finding that letter writing has been a key part in making sure that there is a funding market that emerges. What I mean by that is that governments have been overwhelmed with different options to reduce emissions that are already existing. They have to figure out how to categorize reduction programs and then fund them, finance them, and also to encourage what's happening with the private sector, private investment. And so we're at the point with our company, and I would like you to know that we certainly have thought that it's been an emergency for a long time. But when we go to talk to governments, the actual machinery that needs to be in place has not been in place for us to move more quickly. That we've had to actually take into our own hands, and we are getting closer to a resolution of that. So I just want you to know that as far as our specific technology, which we think is going to do well, we've also communicated it very well to the United Nations level. There's a group of scientists that review it called the Clean Development Mechanism. They have identified that our technology is globally scalable, so we're highly encouraged, and we just have to keep moving forward to ensure that we handshake properly with the government machinery that emerges for projects like ours. And we want everybody to know that we believe everything happening at the same time up to a significant level is healthy and is going to produce hopefully the best results. If we're all talking and sharing, we can contrast and compare, and from that process we will emerge with the more easy to adopt, better solutions, by circulating the experience and the ideas that we all have. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about our technology.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Viva. Professor Paul.
Yeah, I think hopefully we as a society have learned some lessons from the the COVID virus over the last year that we've had to put up with, and that we can take some of these lessons and bring them into areas like food supply, and also for resilience, becoming more resilient. And there's an interesting connection actually, because for a long time, I've been calling the coronavirus problem, and I've been calling it an indoor disease. I mean, if you're outside, you're far, far safer. All the contact tracing studies show that it's transferred indoors. And when the indoor air ventilation is not sufficient, then the risk is extremely high. So what I've been trying to do is, not just for this virus, but for future viruses, I would like to see indoor. I would like to see carbon dioxide (CO2) monitors put on all indoor public spaces. Now we know that outdoor levels are about 400 plus parts per million. So when the indoor CO2 level goes above about 700 or 800, call it 800 parts per million, then an alarm could go off and people are in an unsafe environment as far as catching the virus. If there's one contaminated person in such a space, it will spread around and it can contaminate everybody in the room. So the air ventilation and opening windows and having just doors open to indoor public spaces, we can do that. But if we have a number, if we have a monitor inside with a number, and we know that that number is a proxy for virus particles, then this is a way to eradicating the harmful, like just for suppressing viruses before they get out of control, because it's all transmission through the air. People coughing and breathing, and if it's a dry environment, then the water droplets evaporate. Then you just get the virus particles, and they can float in an indoor space for hours and hours. So, but the other important thing is if people have if there's CO2 monitors inside in all public spaces, people see what the CO2 number is, and from year to year they can see how much it rises, and the world collectively starts to understand about the CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere. And as climate change worsens and accelerates, I really do. I'm really concerned. I think the risk is high that the rise of CO2 not just comes from from us, from burning fossil fuels, etc., but it starts increasing significantly because we lose the sinks of the trees, etc. The capability of the oceans to absorb CO2 decreases as the water temperature increases. So that number will start rising extremely quickly, and people can see that number, right? So not only is it important to know in terms of protecting us from catching the virus indoors, because we have a metric on the quality and amount of ventilation. It tells people what the level is at, and they can associate it with the climate change and the extreme weather events and the lack of, the higher food prices, etc. And then that's a number we can figure out how to reduce to safe levels. So I think there's a nice cross connection here, and it's not just this virus; it's any virus that comes along. Unfortunately, we forget these lessons because in 1918, with the Spanish flu, we learned a lot of lessons about ventilation. We put field hospitals outside and had much greater success rates at healing people. And we encouraged people to be outside, back then. And the virus comes along in 2020. And what do? We tell people that washing their hands and don't touch, be wary about surfaces is the biggest risk. And of course, that's completely, the risk is not surfaces. The risk is the air that you breathe inside in public space indoors. So, I just like to say, if we want to, the thing is, there's all kinds of ideas. People have all kinds of different ideas. The thing is we need to start operating in phase on these ideas. So if all environmentalists, if all people like us, for example, realize, well, hey, yeah, the CO2 thing is a no-brainer inside. If we all push this idea for several weeks to a month to a few months, then maybe we'll get public policy on it. So just as an aside, an interesting anecdote, and then I'll stop. Yesterday, I was raking the grass. It's spring, and the minister of infrastructure in Canada, lives close by, and she walked by, and I had a chat with her exactly about CO2 monitors, and she said they're very aware of ventilation issues as far as virus transmission, but the CO2 thing she had not heard of. So I'm going to send her all of the research studies that the best ones that have come along, and maybe something like that can get changed. Writing letters to the editor. Community is not trained in indoor air ventilation, right? The medical community, this is a big, huge oversight for the medical community, that they know almost nothing about how the virus is transmitted through the air. They were all focused on surfaces a year ago. And they're only coming around now. So it takes time to get the proper messages out to people. So anyway, thank you, Sharif, for running these sessions, and thank you to all the panelists and viewers as well.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Just I want to add one experience, like example, country like Bangladesh. Soon, I think even my birthland, it's also has a lot of problem, especially for climate change. Maybe many of 30% of our land it's go under sea. There is a possibilities because Bangladesh will be highly affected for this climate change. So I do not want to mention the organization name, one of the largest corporate organization association. They have more than 10,000 corporate executive working under their this association. So when I discussed with the president and I said that we need to develop more training on climate change, we need to create awareness in the corporate house and the government peoples and other things. So initially he denied. Even in Bangladesh, we have to understand the reality. Initially, he denied. He said, no, we do not need it. This is not necessary for our country. Let's move with this industry 4.0, AI and big things. So I said that our land goes underwater. Many millions and millions people lose their lands and it will be highly affected. This is the real scenario of the grassroots level, real scenario of the developing nation. I'm sharing with these things. So anyway, finally he convinced. I'm happy that I convinced this association because they are the largest corporate association. Many corporate house, if we can train them, then we can get into the grassroots level. But reality is that most of the developed nation is different. It's a Canada maybe different, USA different. But fact is that the developing nations, we have to reach them, even though it's a big talk that this president, that prime minister, they are collaborating, they are meeting. But if you go to the root level, scenario is completely different. So World Talent Economy Forum, we are like strongly engaged with grassroots level people and the corporation and the governments. And our objective is that not only this roundtable discussion, then we want to develop the training as well as develop the projects. So we need support. we need to work together. Like, we need more human resources. We need Professor Paul, Professor Viva, Madam Betlav, James Eid, Alex, everybody in a one team, and we have to work together if we want to change millions of human lives, if we want to change the real things. So we are working hard. We are working with the many different countries, try to convince them, trying to negotiate more than like 16, 18 hours of time every day, our team working. So hopefully we can make some positive change. But reality is that we have to change the grassroots level people. Otherwise, this climate change create a lot of problem. So thank you for joining today's session. The concluding remarks from Mr. Alex.
Okay, mic's on. Yes, thank you, Sharif, for explaining all of that. So we do need more environmentalists, and it's frustrating as we have these discussions. We're environmentalists. We have this knowledge. We have this information. And over the last decade, the last few decades, or the last few years, we're desperately trying to reach out to more people to get this information out. Sharif just mentioned a good example. Paul just mentioned how he had to be an activist to contact someone with the information he had. Viva expressed how frustrating it is and difficult in the steps, as well as Beth. So not only are we environmentalists, but we're in ways activists, and it's so difficult that we have to be activists to try to educate the general public in these things that we know. So thank you for letting me know about that, Paul. Paul, thank you for letting me know about the CO2 monitor. That's really interesting. So whenever I'm around a large volume of people, maybe like going near a homeless encampment to distribute humanitarian aid or any high risk area, I actually use a more complex breathing apparatus or respirator that will filter out a higher percentage of particulates in the air. And I also have my carbon monoxide detector because I've covered like 40 or 50 forest fires around California as a journalist, as a disaster relief expert. I keep this in my car. It's beeped a few times. Whenever I'm inhaling too much carbon monoxide, this thing goes off. I know to get out of that area. I have checked on CO2 monitors in the past. Unfortunately, they're about $400 or $500. The firefighters sometimes wear them. It's this little box that attaches, and it has CO2 monitoring. But that would be amazing if a company or corporation found a way to make those and mass produce them for the general public for buildings. It's frustrating that some of these companies or these restaurants are getting away with building a separate tent outdoors that's completely enclosed. So it's like, what's the point? It's like the same thing as being indoors. It's a tent outside. You don't have that air circulation, and you have a higher concentration of CO2, carbon monoxide, and the potential for the spread of COVID. So
you also have lower hydroxyl levels.
And more hydroxyl levels.
The lower
enclosed environments.
Enclosed environments, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love being on shows with you, Viva, and learning more about that. I'd love to learn more in the future. Extremely knowledgeable of all of that. So one thing that hasn't been brought into this conversation, and it directly correlates with what Paul was talking about with the CO2. So the CO2 shows, or maybe even carbon monoxide, the concentration of people exhaling in a certain area. And when that goes up, there's the chance, or the higher chance, that if someone has COVID, if they cough, if they sneeze, or if they're exhaling, those particulates are in the air. So there's this there's studies and information. Anyone's welcome to search this, but there's something called viral load. Now, if someone coughs or sneezes next to you and they have COVID, if you get a lot of those particulates, or sorry, what would it called? A viral load? Yeah. Okay, then you can get really sick if you're close to them if you get a lot. If you're wearing something like this and only a few of them get through, you're going to be not as sick, and you are like less likely to die. So if you're wearing a better breathing apparatus, or if there's more ventilation, it lowers the overall amount of those particulates, and it lowers the chance that you're going to get a large viral load, you're going to get a small viral load, so you're going to get less sick, not sick at all, or hopefully not die. So that is important, air circulation, and thank you for bringing that up. I wanted to thank James for mentioning, you know, again, he just said like, this is a global problem. I mean, that's what it is. It's a climate emergency. It's not just in some regions or different countries. It's a global problem. And I also don't like at all the America first thing. It's like, it's not about America. It's about all of us working together, transitioning into a circular economy. America being a superpower, if you want to call it, we have more resources. It's not, I mean, we just need more balance. And right now there's a huge disproportionate distribution of resources around the world. And America first is like, we want the money, we want the resources, we want to be the best. No, we need more balance around the world. And that's how we close the gap between the rich and the poor. That's how we solve homelessness. That's how we're going to solve things. So I believe in universal basic income, and I don't believe in America first. I think we need more balance, and we need to transition towards a caring society to transition into a sustainable society. Again, thank you, Beth, for talking about if we get scared, we'll start taking action. Unfortunately, scientists said once you started seeing, you know, climate-related disasters and superstorms, it would be too late to stop. And right now, we're seeing all those. So the only way we're going to stop the exponential spread of all these disasters is if we work together exponentially, we implement solutions exponentially, and maybe we can get ahead of all of those positive feedback loops taking place. And that's mainly what I wanted to say in this discussion. So thank you, everyone, for a great discussion. Thanks for all being here. Thank
you, everyone, for joining today's session. This is actually our 251 episode. So share our content as much as possible. And I know that Professor Paul has much more content than us. I think he has 1,000 and 1,000 content. Here, everybody is very resourceful. It's Mr. James Eid, Beth Lapp, Professor Viva. She is a famous scholar. Professor Paul, Alex, everybody has their own work and they are very famous with their work. So we want to share your work with our audience, and hopefully we can go for a summit and conference that time you can present your work with our audience. So thank you everyone for joining today's sessions. Share our content as much as possible, and thank you the honorable speakers for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. We are moving with our next step. We directly want to go for the training and developments. So we are working. So those who want to support our initiative, especially as a trainer, as a mentor, as a researcher, so we can work together and we can solve millions of people problem. Thank you everyone.
Yes. Thank you, Sharif. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.